We are recording this episode late in the afternoon on Tuesday, and I'm not sure when we're going to have this turned around for production, but we are literally reading a headline that just broke within the last 5 minutes. There's been a lot of contention and a lot of guessing around President Trump and the future of Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. Some banter back and forth. Certainly, the president trying to flex some muscles. He came out today and said, I have no intention whatsoever, and that's a direct quote, of firing Jerome Powell. The markets have not enjoyed the sparring over who is the Fed chairman, and hasn't seemed to react too terribly well to President Trump's recommendations that Powell reduce rates. And certainly a lot of people would like the idea of lower rates, but Jerome Powell's not one of them. So get us caught at this time. So get us caught up on.
I don't know if Jerome Powell has an opinion about whether rates should be higher or lower.
All right.
I think Jerome Powell is very much data dependent, and that what he's seeing is, as just as well as other members of the FOMC, what they're seeing is all this uncertainty about tariffs, the idea that potentially tariffs could actually be inflationary, that if you have an increase in price level, and then you have some retaliation from a foreign country and more retaliation and back and forth, the price of goods could continue to increase and cause inflation to pick up again. If consumers begin to suspect that prices are going to be higher in the future, they go out and spend more, and that puts upward pressure on prices even more. If inflation expectations get kind of unanchored, then you have a problem. And if, of course, you have an inflation problem, what you end up with is a Fed that can't cut because their hands are tied, right? And so I think that's important. That's an important clarification, that essentially the president would like the Fed to cut interest rates, but that his own tariff policy could be preventing the Fed from cutting interest rates. And so there lies the issue, right? As we look,
I don't think you're wrong. I mean, and ultimately, the Fed chairman forms an opinion based on data. So he's not just sitting around looking out the window, and if it rains, it's a yes, and if it doesn't rain, it's a no.
I think Powell was very much dovish. Like, remember, he came out when we had a slow month in the labor market last year. Inflation was easing, but still higher than target. The Fed chair came out and rallied the troops to cut interest rates, and they did cut. They kept cutting until December, even though most people thought they should not be cutting in December because inflation had remained somewhat consistently high.
But let's wind the clock. All right, time out though. Let's wind the clock all the way back. I mean, there was an opportunity to cut earlier in the year. In fact, if the memory serves me, heading into 2024, there was a tremendous amount of optimism that there would be. I mean, there were some analysts that were suggesting that we might see 6 cuts in 2024. I think we wound up getting 3, and we had none until we got into July.
That's right. But he was right. I mean, you look in retrospect, the labor market was holding up pretty well. Inflation still well above target. And when I say easing, but well above target. And then he cut, right? I should say the Fed cut. And then, and the Fed cut despite the fact that inflation was no longer really moving fast towards the 2% target. And so to me, that was a Fed that was really leaning into rate cuts in the year ahead. And ultimately what stopped the Fed from cutting further was the tariff situation and the uncertainty surrounding the impact that tariffs would have on the inflation side.
What's in the data right now, though? I mean, that Jerome Powell would be looking at. Like, I mean, we've had I mean, and I'm going to just go back because this is really interesting. Right. And I'm just looking at two stories just to keep it like kind of in the same square, written by CNBC, who they draw a lot of, I mean, they obviously they draw a lot of mainstream attention, right? I mean, in terms of business news, I mean, they're, they would be in, I would suspect the top 5 sources in the United States in terms of business news. And I think that they're probably about as mainstream as it gets. So on Monday, they have a story and with a quote, and it was actually a quote of a tweet. And he says, look, this is Trump writing this. He says, with these costs trending so nicely downward, he's talking about inflation, right? Just what I predicted they would do. There can be almost no inflation, but there can be a slowing of the economy unless Mr. Too Late, a major loser, lowers interest rates now. And so he's referring to Jerome Powell there. And then so that's Monday afternoon. And then Tuesday, just to kind of set this straight, whatever run that Trump was on, as in terms of thinking about like sort of, what was in front of him and on his mind on Monday. He said very specifically today, he has no intention of firing Jerome Powell, none whatsoever. And he never did. And so, well, how does this resolve?
I honestly, I have no idea. I think what you need is basically, and, I can't talk about what policy, should be, what policy should look like in Washington, D.C. That's not my job. I'm an economist. But here's the thing. Inflation, annualized, by, looking at the PCE price index, 3.6% last month. On a year-over-year basis, 2.5%. Oh, by the way, ticked slightly higher last month. And so you just can't, in that environment, you can't be talking about rate cuts when you have the potential for inflation ratcheting up the price level and potentially causing consumers to go out and buy a bunch of stuff ahead of further tariff retaliation. So you just can't. Unfortunately, you can't. It's not an environment that is, where the Fed can't look at inflation numbers right now. I feel confident that we're going to go in the right direction after a rate cut, right? And so that's the problem. What you want is if the growth is slowing, you want inflation and growth to move in the same direction. If they're moving in the opposite direction, it makes it very difficult for the Fed to cut in this environment. So they're going to wait and see what happens next.
So let me ask you this then. All right. And that's completely reasonable, right? I mean, and I'm not asking you to step outside of your role and be anything other than who you are and what you do. You're great. You're great. Now, you don't have to be a prognosticator. And we don't really like to do prognostication here. I mean, I think it's a fool's errand, right? So, the president has put out sort of this from this, quote unquote Liberation Day, announcements, and then, the softening of that within a few days, a 90-day window. There's going to be a lot of, I would assume, ebbs and flows as the United States makes deals. Italy's president, Meloni, there was good conversations last week. And it sounds like she's trying to bring the EU into some level of, or some line of being able to talk about a deal with the United States. So there's progress that's happening. We're not reporting on the daily deals here.
I know, but I'm not even sure if she's the right person with the kind of influence.
Irregardless. So my point is that like, while you and I go about the things that we're doing, in theory, the White House is trying to shore up some trade deals and make things happen. They're not going to sit around for 90 days and then start working on it.
I mean, the whole China thing, is unsustainable, right? So a deal is going to have to happen. Right. It's going to happen.
Again, to my point, there's stuff that's happening. what are the data points or the indices that you're looking at right now to determine sort of maybe which way these deals are going to go? And I mean, with what level of urgency? I mean, if the economy in the United States turns worse or just like everybody's so confused and the president is going to have to maybe do some things that he didn't want to do or does more things that he does wants to do because, I mean, it's the market's leaning that way. What are the data points or what are the indices that you're looking at?
I mean, I think if you really want to bet on, or if you're really concerned about resolution due to in the tariff area, in terms of tariffs,
100%. Let's keep it in that frame.
Then you look at treasury yields, and essentially, if yields go up, you will see this administration essentially reverse course on tariffs, because ultimately, if yields go up, then it really defeats the purpose of yields and inflation, right? So if those things keep moving higher, then ultimately the federal government's facing higher interest rate on its debt, and it's not going to get the rate cuts that it's after anyway. And so that is, I think that's how you judge whether or not the urgency to resolve the tariff problem. And so anytime yields go up, you'll start to see the administration come out and kind of backtrack a little bit to try to hopefully kind of keep yields in check, because markets are still in the driver's seat. We saw it with Liz Truss in England. Right. Do you remember that story?
Oh yeah.
When
story. It was maybe a novella.
Yeah. And so whoever controls, markets, whoever has the money controls where things are going to go. And ultimately, investors are not going to stand by and let things like that happen. It's just a matter of like, okay, well, can I trust the U.S. government? There's a trust factor here. Can I trust? And so if the trust is eroded or gone, people pull out of U.S. assets. You see the devaluation of the U.S. dollar. You see the yields coming down, going up, and all of that stuff is going to kind of put the pressure, I think, on U.S. elected officials to do the right thing.